In the forgotten hills of Kwanokuthula, a village barely on any map, there lived a woman who unsettled every heart she passed. Thandi. Her presence was impossible to ignore, a quiet storm that left men trembling in ways they didn't understand. Husbands strayed from their homes, young boys awoke to feelings they couldn't name, and the elders whispered after dark. Those who tried to possess her often did not live to tell the tale. No clear cause. No warning. Just lives interrupted. And Thandi? She kept moving through the village, unaware of the stir she left behind. Until the day she met someone who might survive what no one else ever had, and everything in Kwanokuthula changed. Who is Thandi really? Why does desire for her seem to bring misfortune? And what happens when a woman who unknowingly brings danger finally opens her heart to someone? In this village of red dust and secrets, 3 types of people exist: the men who want her, the women who fear her, and the dead who tried to have her. But there's one man, one person in all of Kwanokuthula, who might survive what no one else has. Sibusiso, the son of Mkuludlamini, the most powerful herbalist in 3 provinces. Sibusiso doesn't know it yet, but his father's blood carries knowledge that can see through worlds. And Thandi doesn't know it either, but she's about to meet the only man who can look at her and see not just beauty, but the ocean that lives inside her soul. This is not a love story. This is a story about what happens when 2 impossible things collide. Thandi arrived in Kwanokuthula 7 years ago. No one remembers exactly when, which itself should have been a warning. She appeared like morning mist, suddenly present, as if she'd always been there. She rented a small house near the Mzimvubu River, the kind of house where widows usually live alone, counting their memories. But Thandi was no widow. She was young, perhaps 25, with skin that seemed to hold light differently than normal skin does. When she walked to the market, conversations stopped. Not because people wanted to stare, but because they couldn't help it. Her beauty wasn't the kind you see in magazines. It was the kind that makes you forget what you were about to say, the kind that makes married men lie to their wives about where they've been. She was curvy in ways that seemed to defy the hunger that touched everyone else in the village. While other women grew thin from hard work and little food, Thandi's body remained full, womanly, impossible to ignore. She worked as a seamstress, her fingers moving over fabric with a precision that seemed almost mechanical. She spoke softly, smiled rarely, and never, ever invited anyone into her home. The first man who died was Mandla, a taxi driver with 3 children and a wife who sold vegetables at the roadside. He became drawn to Thandi after driving her to town one Thursday morning. For 2 weeks, he found excuses to be near her house, offering rides she never accepted, bringing her fruit she politely refused. One night, his wife found him unusually still, staring at the ceiling with a strange, frozen expression. The doctor reported a sudden heart failure, though no one could truly explain why. Then came Bangani, a young teacher who wrote Thandi poems he never delivered. He was discovered in his classroom, slumped over his desk, as if sleep had claimed him forever. Dumasani, the shopkeeper who had offered her small kindnesses, was found behind his counter, calm as though he had simply fallen into a deep rest. Saifo, Zolani, and Themba followed in similar mysterious ways. 7 men in 6 years, each drawn to her, each gone without clear cause. Families were left searching for answers that the village itself could not provide. The women of Kwanokuthula began to organize quietly, not to confront Thandi, but to protect their families. They whispered warnings to husbands and sons, "Stay away from that woman. She is not for us. She belongs to something we cannot see." But desire is stubborn, and often, the men could not resist walking toward what they were warned against, unaware of what awaited them. Thandi seemed unaware of the misfortune that followed her presence. She mourned at funerals like everyone else, brought food to grieving families, sewed burial clothes for free. If she knew she was the connection, she never showed it. Her eyes carried a sadness that seemed older than her body, a loneliness that lived in the space between her words. She existed in Kwanokuthula but not of it, like a photograph placed in the wrong album. And then, on a Tuesday morning in September, Sibusiso came home from university in Durban. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Sibusiso was 28, tall and quiet in the way his father was quiet, like still water that runs deeper than you think. He'd been studying environmental science, but everyone knew his real education happened in his father's hut, where Mkhulu kept medicines that could cure what hospitals couldn't name and saw things that made visiting priests uncomfortable. Sibusiso had his father's eyes, dark and penetrating, the kind that seemed to look through you rather than at you. He'd heard about Thandi before he saw her. His mother mentioned her carefully one evening, the way you mention a dangerous animal that's been spotted near the village. That Thandi woman, the seamstress. Beautiful, yes, but stay far from her, my son. Men have come to harm around her before. Sibusiso had laughed, not believing, thinking his mother was being dramatic in the way mothers are about protecting sons. He believed in science, in explanations, in cause and effect. Village superstitions were things he'd left behind when he went to the city. Then he saw her at the river on his third day home. She was washing clothes, her hands moving rhythmically through the water, and when she stood up, water running down her arms, Sibusiso felt something he'd never felt before. Not just attraction, though that was there, powerful and immediate. But something else. A pull, like gravity, like the river itself was reaching through her to grab him. He watched her from a distance, hidden by the acacia trees, and what he saw confused him. Around Thandi, the water seemed to move differently. Small ripples appeared where there should be none. Light reflected off her skin in ways that didn't match the angle of the sun. And when she turned her head, for just a moment, her eyes caught his across the distance and he felt the air leave his lungs. That night, Sibusiso dreamed of oceans he'd never seen. Of palaces built from coral and pearl beneath waves that touched no shore. Of women with Thandi's face singing in languages that predated Zulu, predated Xhosa, predated human speech itself. He woke up sweating, his father standing in the doorway of his room, burning impefo, the sacred herb smoke filling the space. You saw her, Mkhulu said. Not a question. A fact. Sibusiso nodded, still shaken. His father sat on the edge of the bed, old hands trembling slightly. That woman is not what she seems. She is not even fully what she thinks she is. What do you mean? She is Mamlambo's child. From the Water Kingdom. She doesn't know it herself, but her blood is not human blood. It's salt water and ancient magic. Men struggle because they cannot contain what she is. Their spirits are overwhelmed in her presence. Sibusiso wanted to argue, to bring up biology and psychology, but the dream was too fresh, too real. Why doesn't she know? He asked instead. Because she was sent here as a baby, abandoned at the river's edge, raised by an old woman who's long dead. The Water Kingdom does this sometimes, places their children among humans to see what happens, to test boundaries between worlds. But the magic doesn't leave them. It waits. Over the next 3 weeks, 4 more men tried their luck with Thandi. Sibusiso watched from a distance as each one approached her with gifts, with words, with hopeful hearts. He watched as she politely refused them all, her face showing something like fear mixed with resignation, as if she knew what was coming even if she didn't understand why. Jabu, who sold cell phone airtime, followed her home one evening, drunk on umkombothi and courage. He was found the next morning, peaceful and still, as if sleep had claimed him. Mduduzi, a builder with arms thick as tree trunks, cornered her at the shop, begging her to give him a chance, just one chance. He collapsed 3 days later while working, gone quietly without explanation. Simpiwe wrote her a letter, left it at her door, walked home feeling hopeful. His mother found him the next night, calm in sleep, the letter somehow back in his pocket though he'd definitely left it at Thandi's house. Nkosinathi was the worst. Young, only 19, with a beautiful girlfriend who loved him truly. But Thandi smiled at him once, just once, a brief acknowledgement as they passed on the road, and he became obsessed. He withdrew from life, stopped eating, spent hours standing outside Thandi's house, hoping for a sign. One morning, he was found quietly at home, the mystery surrounding him leaving the village uneasy. The pattern was undeniable now. Desire for Thandi carried unforeseen consequences. And through it all, Thandi seemed trapped in a situation she could not understand, isolated by beauty that had become a force she never chose to wield. Sibusiso couldn't stay away. He knew he should. His father warned him daily. His mother begged him to find a nice girl from church, someone whose beauty wouldn't put him in danger. But he was drawn to Thandi not despite the risk, but because of the mystery wrapped around her. He began to research, combining his father's traditional knowledge with his own education. In old texts and elder testimonies, he found references to the Mamlambo, water spirits who sometimes walked on land, whose beauty was a test, whose love could be overwhelming to ordinary people. But he also found something else, something his father confirmed reluctantly. Those with certain bloodlines, those who carried the gift of seeing between worlds, could sometimes bridge the gap between human and spirit. They could touch what others couldn't without being consumed by it. "You think you can save her," Kuludlamini said one evening, reading his son like a book written in large print. "No," Sibusiso replied honestly. "I think I can understand her. There's a difference." He began watching Thandi differently, not with desire but with attention, noting the small impossibilities that surrounded her. How she never seemed to sweat even in the hottest weather. How birds went silent when she walked beneath trees. How the river's sound changed in pitch when she was near, becoming almost musical, almost like language. One evening, he approached her at the market, not with flowers or pretty words, but with a simple question. "Do you dream of water?" She turned to him, surprise breaking through her usual guarded expression. "What? Water? Oceans? Do you dream of them?" Thandi's hands trembled slightly as she held the tomatoes she'd been examining. "How did you know?" "Because I dream of them too. Since the day I saw you. And I think you need to know why." They talked for an hour, standing there in the market while vendors packed up around them. Sibusiso didn't flirt, didn't compliment her beauty, didn't make the mistakes that had caused harm before. He treated her like a puzzle to solve, a mystery to understand, and Thandi, starved for conversation that didn't revolve around desire, opened up in ways she never had before. She told him about the loneliness, about witnessing events she didn't understand, about the old woman who raised her saying with her dying breath, "You are not from here, child. Never forget that, but never try to remember either." She told him about the pull she felt toward the river, how she sometimes woke up with sand between her toes though she'd gone to sleep in her bed, how her reflection in water sometimes showed someone slightly different, someone with eyes that glowed faintly green. Sibusiso listened, and then he told her the truth. "You're Mamlambo's daughter. From the Water Kingdom. You're not fully human, Thandi. And the unusual events that happen around you happen because human minds and bodies aren't built to handle what you carry. You're not cursed. You're just powerful in ways this world wasn't built for." Thandi cried then, not delicate tears but deep sobs that came from a place of recognition, of finally having words for the wrongness she'd always felt. "I never wanted anyone to get hurt," she whispered. "I know. But what if there's a way for you to be who you are without putting people in danger? What if someone could be with you who could share this without being overwhelmed?" She looked at him with hope and fear mixed equally. "And you think you're that person?" "I think I might be. My bloodline carries its own magic. Not from water, but from earth and ancestors and the spaces between. I think that's why I can stand this close to you without being harmed." It was true. They stood less than an arm's length apart, and Sibusiso felt the pull, felt the power radiating from her, but it didn't overwhelm him. It fascinated him instead, called to something in his own blood that recognized it as kin rather than threat. Over the next month, they met secretly, carefully. Not as lovers yet, but as explorers of each other's impossibilities. Sibusiso brought his father's books, read to her from texts about water spirits and their human interactions. Thandi showed him the small magic she'd learned to hide, how she could make water move without touching it, how she could breathe underwater without really understanding how. Nkulu performed a ceremony, ancient and complex, that confirmed what Sibusiso suspected. Thandi was fully of the water kingdom, her human appearance just a shell wrapped around something vaster, something that belonged to depths no fishing boat had ever reached. But the ceremony also revealed something else. Sibusiso's protection wasn't absolute. He could withstand her unusual influence because of his bloodline, but if Thandi's power ever fully awakened, if the water kingdom ever called her back, nothing human could hold her, not even him. They were living on borrowed time, building something beautiful on a foundation that could dissolve like sand beneath waves. 3 months into their careful courtship, Thandi and Sibusiso fell in love. Real love, not the obsessive desire that had harmed other men, but the kind that grows from understanding, from seeing someone's truth and choosing to stay anyway. They laughed together, planned futures they weren't sure they could have, held hands in the quiet spaces where no one could judge. But the village noticed. Of course they noticed. Sibusiso walking with Thandi. Sibusiso unharmed after walking with Thandi. Sibusiso smiling with Thandi. Sibusiso still well after smiling with Thandi. The women came to Sibusiso's mother, furious and frightened. Your son will end up like the others. Stop this madness before we mourn again. But Sibusiso's mother, who had seen her husband perform wonders for 50 years, who had learned to trust what seemed impossible, defended her son. He is not like the others. He knows what he's doing. Still, fear doesn't listen to reason. Fear spreads like fire through dry grass. Within a week, the entire village was talking. Some said Thandi had finally found her match. Others said Sibusiso was under a spell and would meet a terrible fate. The church ladies organized prayer sessions for his soul. The young men watched with jealous confusion, wondering what made him different. And then, on a Friday night when the moon hung fat and silver over Kwanokuthula, everything changed. Sibusiso and Thandi were walking along the river, the water singing its strange song that only they seemed to hear. Thandi was telling him about a dream she'd had, about a palace made of green glass beneath the waves, about a woman with her face who sat on a throne of pearl and commanded sharks like pets. As she spoke, the river began to glow. Faintly at first, then brighter, a green-blue light that had no natural source. The water's song grew louder, became words in a language Thandi suddenly understood though she'd never learned it. Come home, daughter. Your exile is ended. Come home to your throne. Thandi gasped, stumbled, and Sibusiso caught her. When he touched her skin, it felt unnaturally cold, like deep ocean water that had never seen the sun. I have to go, Thandi whispered, her voice strange, layered with harmonies. It's calling me. I have to go. No, Sibusiso said, gripping her tighter. You don't. You can choose to stay. Can I? She turned to look at him, and her eyes, which had always been dark brown, now glowed faintly green. I don't even know what I am, Sibusiso. How can I choose what I don't understand? The water rose, defying explanation, climbing the riverbank toward them. In the glowing water, shapes moved, massive forms that could have been fish or could have been something far older. A voice came from everywhere and nowhere. The human boy cannot keep you. His blood may protect him from your influence, but he cannot stand against us. Come willingly, daughter, or you will be taken back. Sibusiso pulled Thandi away from the reaching water, his mind racing through everything his father had taught him. There was a ritual, an ancient one, rarely successful. A way to anchor a water spirit to land, to give them choice over their nature. But it required sacrifice. It required the one performing the ritual to give up part of their own strength, to become a bridge between worlds. He would survive, but changed, aging faster than normal, his own power dimmed. He had never told Thandi about it because he'd hoped they'd never need it. "Sibusiso, you're hurting my arm," Thandi said, her voice flickering between her normal tone and something unfamiliar. "Let me go. It might be easier this way." "No," he said again, more firmly. "I love you. The human you. The woman who sews and laughs and cries at funerals. I love that person. And I believe she wants to stay." "Wanting isn't enough," Thandi whispered, tears streaming down her face, each one glowing faintly before touching the ground. "Sometimes it has to be chosen." Sibusiso began to chant, words his father had made him memorize years ago, words he'd never thought he'd use. Ancient Zulu mixed with older languages, mixed with sounds that weren't quite words at all. The air around them thickened. The water spirits cried out, a sound like storms being born. "You cannot do this, human. She is ours. She has always been ours." But Sibusiso continued, his voice growing stronger even as he felt his own energy draining, flowing out of him and into Thandi, becoming a bond made of love and choice that anchored her to the land, to humanity, to the possibility of a life she chose. Thandi collapsed, Sibusiso catching her as he too fell to his knees. The glowing water retreated, restless but held back, the spirits unable to cross the boundary the ritual had created. In the sudden silence, broken only by their uneven breathing, Thandi looked at Sibusiso with eyes that were brown again, fully brown, no trace of green. "What did you do?" she asked. "I gave you a choice," he said, his voice weak. "You can stay. You can be human, or as close to it as possible. The Water Kingdom can't force you back. But Thandi, you have to choose it. Every day. If you don't, the binding will break." "What did it cost you?" She could feel it, sense the change in him, the dimming of the light he used to carry. "Nothing I wouldn't pay again," he said, smiling through obvious exhaustion. "But I'm going to age faster now. I might not live as long as I should. And my father's gifts, they're weaker in me now." Thandi cried then, holding him as understanding dawned. He had given up years of his life, given up his inheritance of power, to give her the freedom to choose her own path. The village learned what Sibusiso had done, though not all the details. They only knew that the danger around Thandi had ended. That she could now be approached without harm coming to anyone. That whatever had surrounded her had been addressed by Mkula Dlamini's son. Some called it a miracle. Others whispered about powers beyond their understanding. But no one could deny the change. Thandi and Sibusiso married 6 months later in a quiet ceremony by the river. The same river that had once seemed to call her now bore witness to her choice to stay. She wore a dress she'd sewn herself, white with blue embroidery that looked like waves. Sibusiso wore his father's traditional skins, looking older than his 29 years but happy in a way that time could not diminish. They built a house together on land between the river and the village, a place that belonged to neither fully but drew from both. Thandi continued sewing, her fingers still impossibly precise, and also began teaching young girls, passing on skills and secrets about being a woman in a world that often feared female power. Sibusiso helped his father with traditional medicine, his diminished gift still strong enough to heal, to help, and to see what others missed. But the Water Kingdom did not forget. Every full moon, the river would glow faintly, a reminder of what Thandi had left behind, what she could still return to if she chose. She never did. She chose Sibusiso, chose mortality, chose the hard, beautiful work of being human. The choice had a cost. She aged now, where before her beauty had seemed timeless. She felt pain, hunger, and all the small sufferings that human life brings. Sometimes, late at night, Sibusiso would wake to find her standing at the window, staring toward the river with an expression of longing so deep it hurt to witness. "Do you regret it?" he asked once. She turned to him, her beauty still present but softened now, made more real by time and choice. "Every day I regret what I gave up. And every day I choose you again anyway. That's what love is, isn't it?" Choosing the same person over and over, even when the alternative calls to you in a voice that feels like home. Sibusiso died at 57, looking 80, his body worn from the sacrifice he'd made at 29. Thandi held his hand as he went, her tears falling on his weathered face, each one carrying a faint glow of what she'd once been. "I would do it again," he whispered with his last breath. "Every time. In every life. I would choose you." She buried him on the hill overlooking the river, where he could see both worlds, the one he'd kept her in, and the one he'd helped her leave behind. Then Thandi made her final choice. The Water Kingdom called to her again, stronger now without Sibusiso's tether. She could return. She could go back to being what she was, powerful and untethered, no longer bound by the limits of human life. She walked to the river's edge on the night of his funeral. The water glowed in welcome, voices singing softly in joy at her return. For a long moment, she stood there, remembering the palace beneath the waves, the power she'd given up, the eternity she could reclaim. And then she turned and walked back to the village. Back to the house she'd shared with Sibusiso. Back to the girls she was teaching. Back to the humanity she had chosen and would keep choosing, even though the man who made it possible was gone. Because that was his gift to her. Not just the ability to stay, but the power to keep choosing, every single day, who she wanted to be. So tell me, if you were Sibusiso, would you have given up years of your life for love? Would you have performed that ritual knowing exactly what it would cost? And if you were Thandi, could you keep choosing mortality, keep choosing pain, aging, and death, when immortality called to you in a voice that sounded like home? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me if you've ever loved someone enough to give up everything, or if you've ever been loved that completely. Because this story from Kwanokuthula isn't just about magic and water spirits. It's about the choices we make when love demands everything from us. It's about whether we're brave enough to let ourselves be transformed by another person's sacrifice. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the costs of love and the price of choosing your own path, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you never miss the next story. Next time, I'm taking you to a different village, a different river, where a river maiden didn't just take one life, but an entire village chief's legacy. And trust me, you'll want to hear how that ends. Until then, remember, sometimes the greatest magic isn't in the powers we're born with, but in what we're willing to give up for the people we love.